All right, welcome everyone who's present to the meeting and welcome to those who are watching at home. I must remind you that the meeting is being webcast live and everyone seated must use their microphones to be heard on the webcast. There's no scheduled fire alarm, so if one goes off, it's for real. There are two exits in the room, one over there and one to the right behind me. And introductions. I'm Stephen Watson, Chair. Next to me is Councillor Simon Marlow, Vice Chair. We have Neil Button, Interim Development Management Team Leader. Here we are. We have Amit, well, I'll do these in order. James Mead, Principal Planning Officer. Amit Patel, Planning Officer. Rachel Lee, to my right, Legal Advisor. Matthew Armstrong, there, Hertfordshire Highways, and George Fermer, also of Hertfordshire Highways. Peter Manning's here, Committee Support Officer. Martin Plummer, Service Manager for Development Management and Enforcement. Jackie Bruce, over there, Section 106 Programme Manager. And I would also like to introduce the Council's Executive Member for Planning and Growth, Councillor Vicky Glover-Ward, who won't be taking an active part in this meeting, but is here in an observing capacity. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair. An apology from Councillor Ruth Buckmaster, and Councillor Stanbull is her substitute, and then an apology from Councillor Holt. Thank you.
Right. And Chairman's announcements are just to remind you again to use your microphones when speaking, because we're being webcasted. Do we have any declarations of interest? Nope. Right, members, we're going to go on to the minutes. We have the minutes from the meeting held on the 22nd of January 2025. Has anyone got any amendments or comments on those? If there are no amendments, can we have a proposer for the minutes being an accurate record of the meeting? Councillor Devonshire. Is that seconded? Councillor Estop. Right, let's have a vote for that. To approve? That's everyone. Thanks. Yep, the minutes are agreed. So moving on to the first of our two applications to consider. We have 3/24/1457 an outline planning application for up to 91 dwellings, including affordable homes, with all matters reserved apart from access at land north of Standon Hill, or brackets Cafe Field, Puckridge, Hertfordshire, and that's on pages 18 to 136. And I would like to invite James Mead to present the application.
Thank you, Chair. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This is the site location plan for the planning application and an aerial image showing the site and the surrounding area. You can see from the aerial image that the site is made up of an agricultural field, together with the carriageway of Barley Mead Way and a strip of land along the northern and western side of an adjacent housing development. The site is located on the northern side of the A120, close to the junction of this route with the A10. The site is adjacent to, but outside of the village boundary of Standon and Puckridge, which is designated as a Group 1 village in the district plan. The village adjoins the site to the east, where there are residential properties on Aston Road, Plashes Close and Hammersfield Close. The village also extends to the north and west of the site. Directly to the west of the site is a modern housing development of 93 dwellings, granted planning permission in 2018. The location of the site outside the village boundary means that land is part of the rural area beyond the Greenbelt. Next slide, please. This is an image from the applicant's design access statement, which shows some of the services and facilities in the area. I've identified some of the key services and facilities on this slide. You'll see to the east on Station Road is Ralph Sadlier Middle School, Roger de Clare First School, and a doctor's surgery. Standon High Street is also to the east and contains 2 convenience stores, post office, and some other limited facilities. To the northwest and off Puckeridge High Street is St Thomas of Canterbury Primary School. Puckeridge High Street is also to the north and also contains some limited services, including a pharmacy. There are also bus services running through the area, with bus stops present on the A120 within 300 metres of the site. Bus stops are also available within the village. Next slide, please. This is a photo facing east along the A120. The application site is on the left-hand side of this image. You can see in this image that the site is well screened by vegetation along the highway verge. Next slide, please. This is a photo facing west along the southern site boundary and the A120. The application site is on the right-hand side in this image. Again, you can see the screening provided by vegetation. This image also shows an existing pathway alongside the A120. Next slide, please. This is a photo facing north from the southern site boundary. You can see the agricultural nature of the site in this image. On the left-hand side, you can see the modern housing development of 93 dwellings, while on the right-hand side, you can see the properties on Aston Road and Plashes Close. Next slide, please. This is a photo facing northeast from the southwestern corner of the existing field. In the background, you can see the properties on Aston Road and Plashes Close. You can also see how the land levels rise up towards the centre of the site. Next slide, please. This is a photo from the northwestern corner of the field facing southeast. Again, you can see the land levels rising up to the south. Next slide, please. This is an image along the western boundary of the field. You can see the lower land level of the adjacent modern housing development on the right-hand side there. Next slide, please. This is the existing agricultural access in the southeastern corner of the field. This access is proposed to be upgraded to an emergency vehicle access through this scheme. The image also shows a northwesterly view across the site. Next slide, please. This is a photo of the northeastern end of Barleymead Way, which is an access road on the adjacent modern housing development. This existing road is proposed to be extended at this point to provide access into the site. Next slide, please. These are 2 images of the key junctions in the locality. On the left-hand side is the junction of the A120 with Cambridge Road. This junction is utilised for access to the modern housing development and would also be utilised to access this current application site. The image on the right-hand side shows the junction of the A120 with Old Standon Hill and Barleymead Way. This junction is used as the exit from the modern housing development onto the A120. Next slide, please. There's notable planning history that is of relevance to this current application. The current application site was formerly part of a larger agricultural field that also included land to the west. An application was submitted on this larger agricultural field in 2015 for up to 205 dwellings. This scheme was, however, eventually reduced down to an outline application for up to 160 dwellings. The illustrative master plan for that 160 unit application is shown in this image on the screen. This application was recommended for approval by officers. However, the Development Management Committee at that time overturned the recommendation and the application was eventually refused on 3 grounds. Firstly, the landscape and visual impacts of the development. Secondly, the lack of access to services and facilities. And thirdly, the highway safety concerns with the junction of the A120 and Cambridge Road. Next slide, please. Following on from that, an outline application was submitted in 2017 for up to 93 dwellings. This application solely related to the western part of the larger field and mostly excluded the current application site. This application was approved and the development has been built out. The site layout for that application is shown in this image on the screen. Next slide, please. The current application is for up to 91 dwellings, including 40% affordable housing. The scheme would also include an internal access road, public open space, play spaces, pedestrian and cycle routes, an emergency vehicle access and drainage features. Beyond the site boundary, it is also proposed to deliver a new and upgraded shared footway and cycleway. The image on the screen is the parameter plan submitted with the application. This plan is for approval as part of the application. The orange and yellow zones on this plan identify the areas for the proposed housing development on the eastern side of the site. Within the orange areas, building heights would be restricted to 2 stories, whereas within the smaller yellow area to the northern part of the site, building heights would be restricted to 1 story. The public open space is shown in the green colour on the southern and western parts of the site. Next slide, please. This is an image of the illustrative master plan also submitted with the application. This plan demonstrates how the site could be developed. However, this plan is not for approval. This plan again shows that the housing development would be located on the eastern side of the site. The applicant has sought to position the built development in this location to avoid the highest land levels on the site, which are found in the central and southern parts of the field. This plan also shows the public open space on the western side, which would include the play spaces, the pedestrian and cycle routes, the drainage features and areas of planting. Next slide, please. The outline form of this application means that the housing mix is currently indicative. However, the applicant has confirmed that 40% affordable housing would be provided on site. The scheme could also provide a range of unit sizes, as shown in this table on the screen. In particular, the scheme could deliver a substantial number of 3-bedroom homes, which is the most in-demand housing type in the district. In addition, the scheme could provide a notable number of 2-bedroom homes, addressing the housing needs set out in the Standard Neighbourhood Plan. Next slide, please. In terms of landscape character, the site is within Landscape Character Area 73, identified as the High Cross Plateau. This landscape character area is described as an open plateau bisected by the A10 road. However, as you can see in this image on the screen, the site is also close to Landscape Character Area 91, the Upper Rib Valley. A key feature of this landscape area are the ancient settlements on valley slopes, such as Standon and Puckeridge. The site is also close to Landscape Character Area 92, the Puckeridge Parklands. In addition, the landscape character of this site is strongly influenced by the proximity to built development within the village. It's important to note that the site is not within a valued landscape for the purposes of paragraph 187 of the NPPF, such as an area of outstanding natural beauty or a national landscape. Officers' assessment of the impact of the development on landscape character is set out in the committee report. Next slide, please. This is an image from the Standard Neighbourhood Plan, which shows some of the protected views within the parish. You can see that the application site is within some of these views. Of particular note are PV1, which is taken from Mentley Lane West, some distance to the northwest of the site. PV2, which is taken from close to St Edmund's College, some distance to the west. PV3, which is taken from a position to the north of Puckeridge. And PV4, which is a view taken from a public footpath to the south of the site. The committee report has considered the visual impacts of the development on all these views. Next slide, please. The applicant has submitted a landscape and visual appraisal with the application, which considers the visual impacts of the development from 13 views within the locality. This includes PV1, PV2, PV3 and PV4 from the neighbourhood plan, which are shown in this image. The landscape and visual appraisal identifies a range of impacts on these views. However, the majority of impacts are assessed as moderate or minor in their nature. Next slide, please. Moving on to the access arrangements. This image identifies key access points to and from the site. In terms of access to the site, it's proposed for vehicles to exit the A120 to the north onto Cambridge Road before travelling eastwards along Old Standon Hill. Vehicles would then move in a northeastwards along Barley Mead Way to reach the site. Exit from the site onto the A120 would be via the junction of Barley Mead Way and Old Standon Hill with the A120, as shown in this image. An emergency vehicle access would also be created in the southeastern corner of the site, with the existing agricultural access upgraded. Bollards would be installed across the access to prevent it becoming a second permanent access or a through route. Creation of this emergency access and the adjacent cycle connection would result in a requirement to remove part of a hedge identified as H9 in the neighbourhood plan. Next slide, please. The access road into the site would be via an extension of Barley Mead Way at its northeastern end. This new access road is shown in the dark blue colour in this image. Next slide, please. Beyond the site boundary, this scheme proposes to deliver a new and upgraded shared footway and cycleway directly to the south of the site. This is an image of the western part of the shared footway and cycleway, which would extend eastwards from Barley Mead Way. There is currently an existing pathway in this location between the site and the A120. This pathway is proposed to be widened to a 3-metre surface to provide this upgraded route. Some trimming back of hedge H9 from the neighbourhood plan would be required close to the southwestern corner of the site in order to create this new route. Next slide, please. This image shows the eastern stretch of the shared footway and cycleway. This route would again be upgraded, widened to around 3 metres and would run eastwards from the site to the junction of South Road with the A120. In addition, the route would extend northwards along South Road to the junction with Southfields. Next slide, please. This is an image that shows the full length of the proposed shared footway and cycleway from Barley Mead Way all the way to Southfields. You can see from this image that the route would run close to key services and facilities such as Ralph Sadler Middle School, Roger de Clare First School, the Doctor's Surgery and the Recreation Ground. Next slide, please. In terms of biodiversity, this scheme could deliver a 69.35% net gain. The habitat plan on the screen shows how this net gain could be achieved, with an orchard provided, as shown in the yellow colour, grassland created, as shown in the green, new scrub planted, as shown in the orange, and numerous trees planted across the site, as shown by the yellow dots. Next slide, please. Moving on to drainage and flood risk. The site is fully within flood zone 1 and therefore is at low risk of flooding. In terms of surface water drainage, it is proposed to provide attenuation ponds within the western open space and along the northern site boundary, as shown in the image on this screen. Surface water would run via gravity into these ponds before being fed into a connection point to the west on the adjacent housing development. This connection is shown in the blue dotted line on this image. Surface water would then eventually be discharged into the Puckridge tributary. Neither the local lead flood authority or the Environment Agency has objected to this arrangement. In regard to foul water drainage, the new foul water sewers are proposed to be provided within the main part of the site and also to the north of the adjacent modern housing development. These new foul water sewers are identified by the red dotted lines on this image. These foul water sewers would connect to the public network at a point to the west. Thames Water have not objected to this arrangement, nor have they raised any concern with the capacity of the wider foul drainage network. Next slide, please. In terms of the current recommendation, the committee report includes a list of recommended conditions and obligations. It's worth reiterating that this is an outline application with approval only sought for access. Appearance, landscaping, layout and scale are proposed to be reserved for later approval. In addition, a number of detail matters such as drainage, sustainable design, highways works, biodiversity net gain, landscaping, play spaces, housing mix and affordable housing would be secured by condition or planning obligations. Next slide, please. The approximate Section 106 contributions that would be secured through this scheme are listed in the table on screen. The final Section 106 figures will be calculated at reserve matter stage once the number and mix of dwellings is set. Based on the current submission, the scheme would make an approximate total financial contribution of over £1.7 million, which would go towards sustainable transport initiatives, bus service improvements, education, community facilities and medical services. Next slide, please. The committee report has identified that the scheme would give rise to numerous benefits in terms of housing delivery, contributing to the council's current five-year housing land supply, 40% affordable housing provision, financial contributions towards community facilities and education, financial contributions towards bus services and sustainable initiatives, creation of a shared footway and cycleway, provision of public open space, including play spaces and pedestrian routes, biodiversity net gain of 69.35%, and wider economic benefits from employment during construction and additional household expenditure at local services. Officers consider that these benefits taken cumulatively should be assigned significant positive weight. Next slide, please. The committee report has also identified some adverse impacts resulting from the development in terms of conflict with the development strategy, and policies covering the rural area beyond the Greenbelt, the increase in vehicular trips, the adverse landscape and visual impacts of the development, the partial removal of hedgerow, and the loss of agricultural land. Officers consider that these impacts, taken cumulatively, should attract moderate negative weight. Next slide, please. Final planning balance is shown in this table. As a reminder, paragraph 11D of the NPPF outlines that planning permission should be granted unless the adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. As required by the NPPF, officers have had regard to the key policies for directing development to sustainable locations, making effective use of land, securing well-designed places, and providing affordable homes. In officers' view, in this instance, the benefits of the scheme would outweigh the adverse impacts. On this basis, the application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions and a Section 106 legal agreement. I think that's the end of the presentation. Could also refer members to the late representations that we have put forward.
Thank you. Now we have Laurie Johnson speaking for the application. Come forward. And you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, councillors. My name is Loraya Johnston, and while I work for Waits Developments, I also stand before you as a young person who understands how difficult it is to get onto the housing ladder. I'm therefore here this evening to urge you to follow your officer's recommendation and approve the planning application before you. Like many young people, I've seen friends and family struggle with the high cost of housing, forced to move further from their jobs, live in overcrowded conditions, or abandon the dream of home ownership altogether. This planning application presents an opportunity to help change that. The proposal includes 91 new homes, 36 of which will be affordable, offering young people like me the chance to either own a home or secure a place with affordable rent. This application results from months of working in partnership with your officers and significantly betters the proposal submitted in 2017 by a different applicant, particularly in terms of sustainability and highways. In 2023, East Hertfordshire declared a climate emergency, and Waits is also committed to addressing this. All homes will be powered by air source heat pumps. We're providing an electric car club, delivering 69% biodiversity net gain, and dedicating 45% of the site to publicly accessible green space. Officers have confirmed that this location is just as sustainable as the Cala site next door. It's a logical choice for development, sitting between the housing estate to the east and the Cala development to the west. We've worked closely with Hertfordshire County Council on highways matters, meeting with HCC officers 5 times and providing evidence to ensure the proposals are safe and suitable. Significant off-site highways improvements, including a new cycle route to local schools and upgrades to the local bus service, will be implemented if this application is approved. These are improvements the area will not get to benefit from without this application. We've also made amendments to the plans based on feedback from your officers to ensure the scheme aligns with local needs. As of March 2024, there were 2,201 households on the Council's housing register, with 58% living in overcrowded or unsanitary conditions. These are real people in East Hertfordshire who need a home. Following the recent appeal decision, it's clearly acknowledged by all parties that the Council is struggling to meet its housing targets. This development will directly address these needs by delivering a balanced mix of private and affordable homes, supporting various income levels. I have been one of the lucky ones and have recently been able to take my first steps onto the property ladder, and the sense of stability, independence, and pride that comes with having a place to call my own is unmatched. By following the officer's recommendation and approving this application, you'll be giving others those same feelings of stability, independence, and pride. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Now, we have the new opportunity, members, for you to ask questions. Now, these questions should be points of clarification and relevant to the points that Ms Anderson has raised, and not a debate or statements or anything. Do I have any? Does anyone want to ask?
Just a kind of first question in terms of, I wanted to clarify something with an officer before I can kind of ask, but I suppose I could ask you the overall thing. Obviously, she referred to 36 affordable homes, but in terms of, James, obviously you said this is an outline application that we're just looking at access, and then obviously we'll later on move to that. If we are making our
Yeah,
decision
just-
based,
It's really meant to be questions
yeah, I know.
to the speaker at the moment.
Can I ask her then, will it definitely always be 36 affordable homes? Because we sound like we're making a decision just on the access.
I think that's fair enough to ask.
It would definitely be 36 affordable homes, and
Yes.
that's not going to absolutely
Yes, so
guarantee it will
40% affordable.
it will never move from that position.
Yeah, we 40% affordable homes
Okay.
for the scheme.
Thank you, Councillor Copley. Any other questions? No, in that case, thank you very much. And we have, next up is Jacqueline Veter, representing the Parish Council, Standon Parish Council. And yes, you have 3 minutes as well.
Thank you. This application is very unpopular with Standon Parish Council and with the 175 local objectors. Planning officers deemed the 2015 application on this site to be acceptable, but members did not agree. Standon Parish Council hopes that the majority of committee members tonight will once again agree to disagree with officers. Policy Bill 1 does not support this development. Standon Parish Neighbourhood Plan does not allocate the site for development and it's outside the village boundary. The Neighbourhood Plan adopted in September 2019 complies with paragraph 14 of the NPPF in that it is less than 5 years old and contains policies and allocations to meet its defined housing requirement. This application is contrary to Neighbourhood Plan policies SP 1, 2, 3, 6, 10 and 21. The reasons for refusal of the 2015 application have not been overcome. The application does not provide sufficient detail to conclude that the harmful visual impact can be adequately mitigated. There is still a lack of sustainable and active means of transport available and limited prospects that the harm caused can be mitigated. The A120 junction has been rebuilt, but residents of Barley Mead Way already get trapped in the estate at busy times by traffic leaving Puckeridge. The proposed walking cycling route to the school is neither the shortest nor the safest route. The gradient from Standon to Puckeridge is 8 degrees. 6 degrees is difficult for experienced cyclists and beyond the abilities of most children. It would run alongside a 40-mile-an-hour road. Cyclists cannot balance at less than 7 miles per hour, requiring more wobble width than the proposed 3-metre path offers and separation from fast-moving traffic. The proposed route fails miserably when tested against the Department of Transport Cycle Infrastructure Design Guide. There is also not room to provide a shared, safe cycle pedestrian path without ripping out mature hedgerow, which would make the route even more unpleasant and increase the visibility of the new development. The cycle path is not viable and so does not count as mitigation for the current lack of sustainable active travel options. A few fallacies appear in the application documents. There is very little employment in the villages. Electric cars will not solve the overuse of the existing estate road or congestion at the junction, and surface water flooding issues plague the villages. Runoff from building on the green slope separating Standon and Puckeridge will exacerbate the problem. The Parish Council's objection letter points out documents submitted with the application are designed to downplay the real-life issues of living in the parish to create an illusion this application is acceptable. The application is not acceptable. On behalf of Standon Parish Council, I ask you to go against the officer's report and to refuse it. Thank you.
Okay, members, have you got any questions? Councillor Bull, use your microphone.
Are we switching on? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, a couple of questions. Am I right in thinking, I do know the actual piece of land, well, I know Standing throughout, Am I right in thinking that if this development goes ahead, you mentioned Ashton Gardens and other areas there. I think it backs onto those rather attractive 5-bedroom houses. I think I'm right in thinking that. And my question is, I wouldn't he, sorry.
Just,
so this, sorry,
yeah, ask
it's to you.
Jacqueline Vito.
So I wouldn't imagine they're very popular with this building if it goes ahead. Am I right in thinking it is going to be close to those rather quality houses right on the tip of the hill where the emergency access is due to take place? Am I right in thinking that? So it's clear in my mind. Right on the Standon Hill, right on the top almost.
Okay, most of the objections are from residents of Barleymead Way and the roads off that development, not the one you're talking about.
Right. Okay. I'm rather surprised.
Okay,
Rather surprised. Anyway, yes, that's the only question I've got for the young lady at this point, but I'd like to come back later on.
You get one chance. Oh, we're not
Things
having
have
it.
changed tremendously since I've been on this planning
Do you have another question?
Chairman, and they have changed tremendously. I've got to say that. Anyway, right.
They have changed. This is a new thing. Councillor Devonshire.
Thank you, Chairman. My question is, how is the proposed cycle path segregated from the A120? Is it just a line on the road, or is it a physical curb or a verge or something like that?
It isn't going to be segregated, which is one of the issues with safety. There's literally a curb between the path that existingly has a curb. So it'll be up against the road, but there will be a path, a curb as there still is now.
So there's a curb between the cycle path and the traffic.
Yeah, as the current situation. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, these are the sort of questions you could ask the officers, actually. Any other questions?
I don't want to miss out.
Right, thank you very much. Right. Now, members, it's over to you.
Yeah, perhaps I can
Councillor Bull.
give you my next one. I noticed in the report they're talking about improving transport, which is gratefully received, I would think, in an area like that. Can you give me some idea of how they're going to improve the transport in that particular development?
Yeah.
Public. I'm thinking about public transport or private transport.
I'll ask James Mead to answer that.
Probably one for highways, but the report in the heads of terms identifies a financial contribution of £250,000 to go towards bus services. In terms of how that's used, that's probably one for highways.
Mm-hmm.
Did you say 150,000?
250.
200.
Yeah, if I can ask one of the highways officers.
Yeah, good evening, members. Thank you for the opportunity to talk this evening. Public transport, yeah, buses, we have secured a financial contribution of £250,000 to improve bus services in the vicinity, primarily the 331 service, but it's not necessarily earmarked just for that service. It's 50,000 per year over 5 years is how that figure's been calculated. The idea is it will particularly enhance weekend services, but we should have the flexibility to spend that on those services as we see fit at the time.
Thank you. Councillor Copley.
As we're on transport, sorry, I'm going to
Yeah.
go back to you again, Matthew. Could you just talk about the viability of the cycle path and your views on that? That'd be very helpful. Thank you.
I'll pass over to my colleague George Firmer on this one.
Thanks. Thank you for the question. The cycle lane originally was only to South Road. Following discussions with ourselves and developer, it now goes up to Southfields. It goes from the site to Southfields. There will be crossings over each side road, which will be drop curbs, so still be vehicle priority. There will be a buffer zone between the highway, the curb and the cycleway, which is shown in the drawings. This will be a minimum of 0.5 of a metre up to a metre buffer zone. There will also be where the emergency access is, there'll be a pedestrian rail to stop anyone that comes down the hill to go off onto the highway network. And the initial bit adjacent to the A120 and the cycleway is shielded by high grass verge and foliage. And that this cycleway should link to local facilities within the TAP.
Just to add, sorry, but very briefly, we heard reference to the Department for Transport's good practice cycle guidance in one of the representations. That's LTN 120. This cycle lane, the proposed works do comply with LTN 120, the government's good practice cycle guidance. It's been safety audited fully, and we're content that it's a suitable, safe provision. Thank you.
So ideally, are we sticking up to transport for the minute? So who was first? Yeah, Councillor Stowe.
Going on from that footpath or the cycleway, it was mentioned by the clerk, I think, of the local council, parish council, that they're quite steep. Can you clarify that, please? Let us know what the gradient is on the cycleway.
Which part of the cycleway? The entire cycleway or the? Yeah, so initially from Barleymead Way, it goes up slightly and then levels out as the hill peak.
No, so the cycleway from the site exit is flat along the A120. So along the actual main road, it's flat. Within the site, there's a slight incline onto it. So yeah, it's the Barleymead Way access. So within the private development, there's quite a notable incline, but there are which it was just flick through there. But in terms of where the development routes out, there are a couple of proposed cycle footpath entrances and exits, and yeah, it's all within the approved gradient parameters.
Right, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Stowe.
I mean, what concerns me is that gradients going uphill might be hard work, but for children coming down a gradient is actually dangerous.
Could I remind members that the audience, people in the galleries, not to shout out, please. Councillor Hill.
I've got two questions. Going back to the public transport, 250,000 sounds like a big amount of money, but it's over 5 years, which is £50,000 a year, which is £136 a day. What do you actually get for £136 a day?
My apologies. Would you mind repeating what you just said?
The public transport contribution to the S106 is 250,000 over 5 years. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So that's £50,000 a year.
That's
which
correct.
Is £130 a day. So what do you actually get for £130 a day?
Okay, yeah. So that will fund at least one new bus. It will fund the drivers needed for that additional bus. The idea is that the money will be pooled from other developments in the vicinity to improve the overall route, particularly as of the 331 service. So it's not just this development funding improvements. That there are other funding pots secured and hopefully to be secured from other developments coming forward that will cumulatively improve the bus service there.
Okay, if it's quick.
It's on the cycle routes. Now, being quite a keen cyclist, and I've mentioned cycling a few times in this forum, it is a very steep hill down. I've cycled it many times, up and down, and you go very quickly. Is there an opportunity, like when you got out Duez, to have it cut into town, so you actually reduce the gradient and then cut back out again? So it actually goes meandering, then more people can join it because it's going through more of the town.
Yeah, so coming back to the gradient for the moment. So the incline, the gradient section of the new cycleway footway is set well back from the carriageway. So there's hedgerow, there's quite steep grass verge. So the section of cycleway that's steeper, you can't actually even see the carriageway at points. It's stepped quite the way back. Where the footway cycleway then becomes flat, which is slightly further to the east, that it's there where it becomes alongside the main A120 carriageway with a buffer, a 1 metre grass verge buffer. I think you were talking about the route further north into Puckeridge, though, is that right?
So, I mean, because it's more steeper towards the standing end, is that correct? So if it could meander in, because it goes past the school down there, so the other road that goes in, there's another primary school down there. And it would just make it more flatter and more accessible to people, because it's just going down the side of the road, because going down an 8% gradient, it's very easy to hit over 30 miles an hour on a bike. So.
Yeah, Councillor Hill, if you address your points to me, by the way, but please.
Thank you for the question. The cycleways is limited by the adopted highway network for it to be used by members of the public, and it only goes up to Southfields, so South Road, Southfields. So I'm unsure how it can be changed within the scope of this development for it to be meandering into town.
Yeah, I mean, members, we could talk about the permeability of the site or something, but I'm aware that there are two more members waiting to ask questions, so I'm just going to go to Councillor Estop first.
Thank you, Chair. This is on the same point. It's about the drawings, really. On the parameter plan that we have before us to approve, that the shared cycleway footway is not shown. That's not on the parameter plan. So I wonder therefore what the status of that drawing is, as it's not, because it's not, you know, secondly, it's not one of the drawings for approval. What is a drawing for approval is the detailed drawings of the road going up and into the site, but we don't have any detailed drawing of the pedestrian and cycle access into the site, and that seems to be a bit of omission. So it's those two things: the cycle walking access, and secondly the status of the shared cycle and footpath.
I think that's one for the planning officer.
Thank you for that question. So you're correct that the plans for the footway and cycleway aren't an approved plan. So they're not on the approved plans list. However, there is a condition included in the recommendation which requires further drawings, detailed drawings of the footway and cycleway. So the footway and cycleway would be secured via that condition.
So the drawing that we're looking at is coming later. We're looking at this drawing later.
So the drawing that was on the screen there is the one that's been submitted with this application. The detailed engineering drawings for the section 278 would be secured via condition. But the cycleway and footway would be secured through that condition.
And the detailed access for the pedestrian cycle access into the site?
It's exactly the same. So there's conditions that require the cycle and pedestrian connections into the site. I can refer you to the exact condition if that's helpful.
Okay,
we're approving access. We're here to approve access. That's what I'm understanding.
Yes, rather than having a conversation, Councillor Estop, between the planning officer, if you just address your points to me, and we're not through me, and not quite such a back and forward conversation here. Councillor Devonshire.
Thank you, Chair. My question is the same as the one I asked Jacqueline Vita. This segregation, you called it, the office called it a buffer zone. Have we got a photo of that or a picture of it so I can see exactly what it looks like and how wide it is?
So I think we've just got this technical drawing, illustrative drawing here, which shows there's 1 meter strip shown there, but I suppose we don't have a photograph because it hasn't been built yet.
Would you like me to come in, Chair? I'm happy to. Or...
Yes, please.
So for most of the route, there will be a 1 metre wide grass verge between the carriageway and the start of the shared footway cycleway. LTN 120, the government's good practice guidance, says for a 40-mile-an-hour road, 1 metre is the good practice recommended amount. So largely that's being met. It does say that that can be reduced to half a metre for a 40-mile-an-hour road, but we've got largely the 1 metre throughout.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just wanted a bit more understanding of the actual carriageway. I think it is, am I right in thinking it's just like a single, there's no overtaking lane. It's just, it's quite a fast road. Obviously it's an A road, but there's no overtaking lane. It's not a very wide road. So there's quite a lot of sort of, the point I'm getting at is there's quite a lot of traffic pressure, and it would be not too difficult for a car to come off the road. So that's the point about having something a bit more than just a grass verge on the separating the carriageway from the cycleway footway. The other point about just so that's one just point of clarification. And
are you making the point of or have you got a question?
So the question is, how wide is that carriageway? And because that has a consequential effect on whether you would need more of a buffer than just a simple verge.
Okay, I'll pass that on to Matthew Armstrong or Mr. Fenner.
I can take that one. Thank you for the question. In terms of LTM 120, as we've alluded to before, there is no design for how wide or narrow a carriageway is on the basis of a buffer zone. Buffer zones are done based on the speed of the road. In this instance, the majority of the speed would be 40, 30, and then 50. All of the buffer zones for these speed limits have been met for the LTM 120. I would note as well that the road is quite straight in this location.
Yeah, there's also solid white lines along both sides, so there's no overtaking allowed.
Councillor Still.
I just wanted to move back to what we're considering tonight, which is the access. When I read some of the drawings provided by the developer Waits, it referred to the access from Barley Mead Way as it wasn't actually finalised. Now I know that's not a planning issue, but I want reassurance that if that access wasn't agreed with the landowner of the other Barley Mead Road, would we be forced to use the emergency access?
So the emergency access will just be an emergency access. That's conditioned. As part of the approved plans, there's a plan on there that shows the access from Barley Mead Way into the site. So that's part of the approved plans.
Shall I go again? I'm back. Thank you. Well, on Waite's drawings, it says proposed access. Now that to me means it's not been agreed. Now I know that's not a planning issue, but that's crucial to one actually agreeing the what we're trying to agree today, the access. So can you clarify that?
Thank you, Councillor. The access that's being considered at this stage is the point of access, and so there was a photograph that was on the presentation that identified the point of access to the development, and that was at the top of Barley Mead Lane, and that's essentially is the point of access to the development site. That's what you're being asked to consider. So there is not a detailed highways plan that you're being asked to consider, but that the point of access to get to this site is what is being offered for consideration as part of this application.
So Councillor Copley. And then
Yes, probably just taking a step back, like Councillor Stowe. I mean, if officers wouldn't mind just helping us again, just outline exactly what we're agreeing today. It's just the access. And in terms of the other conditions, would they come back to us, or are they going to be dealt with by officers down the line? And also, what would be the impact of us agreeing this or not agreeing this application tonight? Thank you.
Okay, that's a quite
Sorry,
big,
I can
quite
repeat
a big
those if you
question
want.
there.
So it's an outline application with all matters reserved except access. So the other reserved matters, appearance, layout, landscaping and scale, would be reserved for later approval. So they would come in as further reserved matters applications, which could be potentially be dealt with under delegated, or if a member asked for it to be called in, it could come to committee.
And was there a larger follow-up about what does that answer all your questions? Did you
Yeah,
have
just about, it was just double checking that tonight we are just dealing with literally with whether we agree the access, and if we declined that, then presumably none of the development would move forward at all. But if we agreed it, then some of this would go through the planning process, whether that was delegated or came back to us by a call-in. Is that correct?
Sorry, could you repeat that question again? I'm not clear on that one.
I was just trying to say what the impact would be of our decision tonight. So if we decided not to approve the access, presumably that means that the development would not move forward at all. Is that correct?
That's correct. We're considering the access to site, the principle of development tonight. And as I said, the other matters will come through reserved matters.
And so, but if we did approve, then the other matters will be reserved matters, either through delegated or coming back to us with calling. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Estop, and then.
Yeah, following on from that, so we're looking at access and we're looking at principle of development. I'm curious, I wonder if officers could say why the land wasn't allocated in the 2018 plan, because there had been some history, there had been some in principle agreements, and there's a road that was ready to go. So I just wondered why it's not allocated.
So the district plan identified enough housing to meet the housing need in 2018, and it wasn't decided to allocate that site at this time. I think things have moved on since 2018. National Planning Policy Framework's been updated. A new standard method has come in. That's increased our housing need in East Herts, and therefore we don't currently have a 5-year land supply. So, as you're aware, the Tilty Balance is engaged in this decision. So, I guess at 2018, the site wasn't allocated as one of those sites to meet the housing need at that time.
Probably worth just coming in there as well, just to confirm the district plan that came in 2018 has a hierarchy of development, and it promotes development in those sustainable locations within the towns and limited in villages. And so this development wasn't part of the district plan and the development strategy that was adopted in the plan at the time. As we know, as James has alluded to, in 2025, the housing supply position in East Herts is different, and because we haven't got a sufficient supply of sites at the moment, it opens the door to consider sites such as this that fall outside of settlement boundaries, that are not allocated and that are speculative in their nature.
So, Councillor Stowe.
I was going to ask, the emergency access, is that also being agreed tonight because it's access? And if it is, I'd like to know what the arrangement is for the bollards. I mean, they say they're removable. Who's going to remove them? Who will have access to the equipment to remove them, so they remain emergency accesses?
As Neil said previously, the main access point is for approval tonight. The emergency access would be secured through the conditions, as I referred to earlier. In terms of the bollards, that might be one for highways.
Yeah, the plans show bollards. Usually they're particular type of bollards to which emergency services have the key. Exactly. Yeah. I think the other thing to note is the look of the access will make it clear that this isn't to be the regular main use. So you know, it's not going to have curb radius. It's going to be, you know, there's be the continuous footway cycleway across it. Essentially, it'll be a vehicle crossover. And although there'll be a dropped curb onto the main road, it'll actually be a slightly higher drop curb. So, you know, it'll actually be a little bit uncomfortable to drive up and down. The idea being that it's not meant to be, you know, a daily use access. Nowhere near that. I mean, the clue's in the name. It's an emergency access, so it's an access we hope will never have to be used.
If you're happy, can we maybe move on to this principle, since Councillor Estott brought up the principle of development. Councillor Burt.
I'm just wondering, because it's great to see so much, you know, biodiversity uplift and the idea of the orchard and the green spaces. I was just wondering who would be maintaining them and still owning that land, because I've been speaking to residents on new estates and they have been slapped with very large service charges, which seem to increase enormously. So who would be maintaining those green spaces and the orchard, and would it be up to the people living in the homes to pay for a service charge? Because it's obviously great to hear about affordable homes, but then if those people living in them then have to pay a service charge to maintain all the green spaces, it seems slightly counterproductive. So just wondering about that.
So there is a planning obligation seeking details of the stewardship and maintenance and management of the landscape areas. So details of that arrangement would be secured as part of the Section 106.
So yeah, it's likely, the likelihood is it would be done by a management company. I believe the standard neighbourhood plan contains policies that requires the open spaces to be maintained by a management company or new developments, and so the likelihood is that it will be a management company. In terms of the concern about affordable housing, the full details of that will be set out in the statement, that the management plan that James has referred to. But for affordable housing, it would have to be set at a level that those houses were still affordable, so they wouldn't be ending up, well, they wouldn't be paying the same service charge that the market units would be paying. And so I think, you know, with the service charges that are levied on these developments, there are securities within the affordable housing to ensure that they wouldn't go beyond a certain point that would make the units unaffordable.
Sorry, and then in sort of every other home, if with the service charge, can it just be increased however they like, or are there some sort of conditions to say it can only be increased, you know, by inflation? Or
I've got two officers waiting to speak. Can I let Jackie Bruce come in?
Yes, I was just going to clarify that East Herts Council does not adopt play areas and open spaces on developments anymore. So it would be down to a stewardship scheme to actually maintain.
Okay, I know. Let legal.
Thank you, Chair. Relating to that stewardship, and not a planning matter per se, but there is some RICS, National Institute guidance about how you calculate estate service charges for residential. And normally that is something that is part of the stewardship scheme. And beyond that, you know, someone acquiring a new unit on an estate where they know they're going to pay estate charges is obviously going to be alert to kind of how that regime will work going forward in terms of their payments and increases in payments.
Councillor Copley.
Is that something we can add to the 106? Because I know developments in my ward, there is a limit in terms of how much the management company can increase the management charge in the 106 agreement. And so I thought that might be a possibility.
It's not really a planning matter, so I don't think it's something we can secure in the Section 106. It's more a private matter between the owner of the site.
It's definitely in the ones in my area.
I think we can look at some form of wording that is for the affordable housing in terms of setting service charge, because that's where we would secure 106 applications. But for the market housing,
yeah, no, that's fine. Even if you could just
that's all.
That,
yeah,
think,
and then
it is in there.
Okay. Councillor Estop.
Chair, I'm happy to take officers' advice on this, and I can see that the access is basically acceptable, and I think the principle of development is acceptable, as shown on this parameter plan. But I'm really unhappy with it being an outline application. All of the objections, the extensive objections that we've read in the report, all of them relate to things that will happen at reserve matters stage. We are anticipating and speculating. I really feel that what we're doing here is approving pre-application advice, and I think that there's so much speculation. So there's such a lot of uncertainty. I think it's, rather than an outline application, it's an uncertainty application, and I think so. There are things that come from that. One is that the weight given to the delivery of housing, which we all understand that and we support that, but the weight is less because it's an outline. It won't happen until there's been a master plan process and a reserve matters application conditions. It's not ready yet. And then in terms of the weight being given to this, the positive weight, one of them is the shared footway. That's not one of the approved drawings. The public open space and the biodiversity net gain, they're not approved. They're not part of the approved drawings. So I think there is an issue with, we're hoping for the best in giving approval. And therefore, I would like to propose that we defer this application so that the outline can be built up with, enough information so that we can get uncertainty rather than uncertainty.
Right, members, is there anything else you would like to bring up?
Sorry.
If I can, Chair, just to give the committee some advice. Obviously, you've got an application before you. In terms of law and statutory procedure, outline applications have to be determined as they are brought before the local planning authorities for consideration. Planning officers may also want to add comments here, but in terms of detail, obviously the conditions and the planning obligations from the officer recommendation are requiring that subsequent detail to come forward, and on balance the officer's view before you is obviously that it is something they are recommending for approval.
Now, at this stage, I would rather our first vote was to approve or not approve.
It's not valid anyway. Seconded it.
All right. So, but does anybody, Councillor Devonshire?
I mean, I completely agree with Councillor Estop. I don't like outline applications for precisely the reasons that she says. But we are here to determine an outline application. What I would like to say is when it comes to the reserve matters, we can obviously call it in, can't we? Yeah. So we can bring it back to this committee. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Stowe.
All I was going to say is that I understand the concerns about outline applications, but they're a perfectly valid application. They're testing to find out whether it got a chance to get in development. That's all it is, really. And I think the important way we can secure what they build is, as Councillor Devonshire says, the matter is called in. And then it's down to you.
Yeah. Now, members, we've covered principle of development a little bit. We've gone in some depth about the transport access, active travel. Councillor Copley.
I was just going to say, given that the application we are looking at is this access, I think we should just see, does anybody have any specific points about the access? I particularly like to understand from officers, are there any negative points about the access? I know we obviously looked at all the positive weightings, but is there anything that we need to consider that might be negative about this particular access? Thank you.
So as you said in the slides, the access would come from northeastern corner of Barleymead Way and then into the site to provide access to the houses. The Highway Authority have reviewed that access and they're content that it's safe from a highway safety perspective. They've also reviewed the junctions within the vicinity, and they consider they're safe from a highway safety perspective. So overall, the access to the development is considered to comply with policies.
Yeah. Sorry, I said negative. And is there any positive reason why this access would be better than other? Are there any other potential access points or anything like that?
We're just considering the access that's been put forward as part of this application. We can't consider alternative accesses. So we're just considering whether the current access into the site as proposed in this application is acceptable or not.
Can I just? Oh, I'm sorry. Who is it?
Just a quick follow-up.
Councillor Estop.
Thank you, Chair. Pedestrian access. We got 2 little arrows, and I think that, from what the officers have said, that's basically what we're talking about, the point of access. But that we don't have any sort of diagram of what that would be like. But they're both on the south side, and I wondered whether there'd been any investigation of a pedestrian access on the north, which kind of goes around the edge of the field and towards the other parts of the villages.
So yes, we did look at the sort of permeability and potential for other access points on other site boundaries. To the east of the site, the site's bound by residential gardens fully along the eastern side, so there's no scope to provide an access point on that boundary. To the north of the site, the land beyond the northern boundary is beyond the ownership of the applicant and beyond the control of the applicant. So yeah, no scope to provide a connection that way at this time. Although the illustrative master plan was updated to show an informal connection there, so it could be a sort of mown pathway along that side of the site. Same on the western side, towards the Carla development. The land beyond that boundary is outside the control of the applicant, but again, the illustrative master plan has been updated to show informal connections to the western side of the site.
Councillor Dunlop.
This isn't about access, it's a completely different topic, so stop me if I'm speaking at the wrong time. But my usual thing is the loss of agricultural land and food production.
Yep.
I did a few calculations on the amount of wheat that we would lose as a result of this, if that's what it's being used for. And it equates to what would be required to make 50,000 loaves of bread per crop. And we would tend to then import our flour from France or Italy, and the increased carbon miles and carbon footprint, I reckon, is somewhere in the region of 7 tons of CO2 per crop, so per annum perhaps. And given that East Harts Council declared a climate emergency, using good grade agricultural land to build houses on it flies in the face of that policy.
But wouldn't that be the case in meeting all our? I mean, how?
Absolutely.
Yes.
So we did obviously acknowledge in the report that there would be loss of agricultural land through this development, and we did attribute some negative weight to that in the planning balance. In terms of the carbon footprint impacts of losing agricultural land, there's no policy within the district plan that requires that to be part of the assessment of this application. So it's not something that we can consider through this application, but as I said, we have attributed negative weight to the loss of agricultural land in the planning balance.
But possibly something that when national policy comes out, and it gives a steer on the value to food production, and it goes into the great detail that Councillor Dunlop goes into, and I think it would provide clarity on the degree to which that harm that we've identified, my colleagues identified, can be weighed against a planning application. I think with a lot of planning applications that come to this committee and come to other committees across the country, this is a regular issue that comes about, and at the moment there simply isn't the planning policy weight behind that issue, and that would sort of sustain that in most cases, I would suggest. This is a higher grade agricultural land. I think it's half of it's in grade 3, and so we are talking about moderate to good quality agricultural land. And so with that loss of that land comes with some harm that we've weighed in the balance, and members are entitled to their own planning judgment on that degree to which harm can be apportioned. But I think what's agreed between the officers is that there is harm. It's just up to the decision maker to assign how much weight to put to that.
And could we bring up, maybe since we're talking about balancing various things, could we have a look at that slide at the end of your report that had the weightings? Now, members, did we want to explore any of the other things on that list? Councillor Devonshire.
Yeah, the only other major harm that I can see is the visual impact, because this is a very elevated site. It's actually on the top of the hill. If you drive up, you get to the top of the hill. This site is, and then you go back down into Puckeridge or Standon. So that would be my other. I think you've allocated. Is it moderate? Yeah, moderate. No. Thank you.
Members, anyone? Well, I'm minded to ask to move towards a proposal. I'm going, if not. Yeah, the recommendation for this report.
Chair?
Yes, so I'm going to propose.
Chair.
Chair, oh, sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I propose that we defer it. Can we deal with that first?
That's not been seconded. So I'm going to propose that we approve this planning application. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Marlowe. And now, members, we're going to vote on the recommendations, subject to the conditions and the 106 agreement. So, votes for? And vote. And it's against? And abstentions. 1. So that is granted.
Can I ask for a short adjournment while we?
Yes, now we're going to, can I propose we have a 5-minute adjournment? Can someone second that? Councillor Dunlop, and a vote for it? Yep. Any against? No. Okay. So we'll be back at just before 20 past. Are we missing?
You're live again.
We're missing a member, aren't we? Right. Just waiting for one more member. Members, we have before us an application 3/22/2321 for the demolition of care home and erection of 52-bedroom care home with hard and soft landscaping, vehicle parking, and associated works at Camellia House Care Home, 34 to 36 Hoe Lane, Ware, Hertfordshire. And first of all, I'm going to invite Amit Patel to present the application.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms, sorry, the next slide. In terms of the location of the site in relation to where, if you can see to the bottom is highlighted the application site, and to the north is Ware Station and River Lee passing through, and just north of River Lee is the main town centre. Next slide, please. So this is the existing elevations for the existing care home. I've just added some dimensions on here to show you the heights of the main elevation. This is the front elevation facing Hoe Lane, and the main bulk of the building is about 9.2 meters tall, and to the right, close to the listed building referred to as Highfield Lodge going further, is 8.1 meters tall to the ridge and 5.8 meters to the eaves. Next slide, please. So this is the elevation currently facing Highfield Lodge. If you can imagine, this is the main bulk of the care home as existing that runs all the way or most of the length of Highfield Lodge as it stands, going well past the building, the rear building line of Highfield Lodge. So this is the elevation from the rear of 36 Hoe Lane, which is to the southern site, which is a single dwelling. So that's looking north from the gardens, and it's broken up because there's main front part of the building, then a connecting bit that is on the opposite side, which is adjacent to Highfield Lodge, and then the rear part along that boundary at the back. Next slide, please. So this gives you a brief overview of the existing floor space. So to the bottom is where Hoe Lane will be, and as you can see on at the current moment in time, you've got 2-story points on the right hand side which will be adjacent to Highfield Lodge. There are no windows at first floor level, but there are at ground floor level facing Highfield Lodge, and the windows facing 36 Hoe Lane are set back quite considerably at this precise moment. Next slide, please. So this plan gives you an overview of what the current care home footprint is and what the proposed care home footprint will be. If you can note that the red line, the main highlighted dashed red line is the bulkier part of the current care home, which is the 2- and 3-story part of the existing care home, and the darker green is the proposed layout of what the proposed care home is going to be. It's more of a T shape rather than a U shape now. So the center wing to the rear of the site is going to be stepped away from Highfield Lodge, as well as going to be a distance away from 36A Hoe Lane. there will be windows present, but as you can see, there's jaggedy edge to the north, which tries to mitigate any overlooking to Highfield Lodge, and the lighter green part is the single story element for the proposed care home. Next slide, please. So on this slide, this gives you the full layout plan. So you can see the distance between the rear of the proposed care home to the outbuilding in Highfield Lodge is over 20 meters away, and the main two-story rear element facing Highfield Lodge is 13.2 meters distance from window to boundary, and on the southern side it's 16.2 meters from the building, the closest part of the building to the boundary, with 36A Ho Lane. And as noted, the front of the building has been pushed back at the end of 36A Ho Lane by 6.5 meters from the rear elevation of 36 Ho Lane. And you note that there is a green belt past the edge of the current building, but most of the garden is going to be in that area. No built form is being proposed in the green belt area. Next slide. So this gives you an idea of the proposed layout of the first floor and second floor of the building. To the right is the elevation facing Ho Lane, and to the north is the elevation facing Highfield Lodge. As you recall, the jagged edges are the windows to stop any overlooking or mitigate any overlooking towards Highfield Lodge. Next slide, please. This gives you an indication of the roof plan. As you would note, there's a hidden terrace. However, in the officer's report, there's a cross-section that has been provided by the applicants, which show that that height of the roof edge to the floor is going to be over 2 meters tall, so will not allow any significant overlooking towards Highfield Lodge. And there is proposal for future PV panels on that roof space, as well as service and plant area to the front part of that flat roof space on the proposed building. Sorry, next slide, please. This gives you a few ideas of what's currently on site. This is the rear communal garden as it stands, which will be part and parcel of the proposed current garden. It's not been reduced. It's going to maintain the same size and just upgraded. Next slide, please. So this view, the first picture on the left-hand side, this is the view of Camellia House in the foreground, and as you look towards the south is 36A Ho Lane and the properties going past. And on the right-hand side, the picture is Camellia House again in the foreground and Highfield Lodge in the background. Next slide, please. So this is the current relationship of the current care home in relationship to 36A Ho Lane and the access between the two properties. Next slide, please. So this gives you a bit more finer details of how the relationship between the existing care home and Highfield Lodge work. In the left-hand side picture, you could see the bulk I was talking about that is currently there at the moment in relationship to the rear elevation of Highfield Lodge. And on the top right-hand corner, that's the rear elevation with windows with the care home behind me. We're taking that picture. And in the bottom middle is the front part of Highfield Lodge and the windows that are there. Next slide, please. So this is giving you a wider picture from the road, showing the bulk that is already there in relationship to Highfield Lodge, which is on the left-hand side. And you can see the windows and the windows on the ground floor on the current care home. Next slide, please. So this gives you a bit more idea about the outbuilding in Highfield Lodge and trying to just understand the relationship between the current care home and proposed care home. On the top right-hand picture, you can see, sorry, left-hand picture is the windows that are in the elevation facing the care home's rear elevation currently. And on the right-hand side, it gives you just a wider context of that outbuilding. And on the bottom picture is more of the relationship of the care home in relation to the outbuilding. Next slide, please. So this gives you an elevational picture or drawing of the proposed elevation facing 36A Hoe Lane. As mentioned, this part of the development will be deeper in relationship to the rear boundary, the rear elevation of 36A Hoe Lane. However, the front two windows in the front gable are to serve a dining and private dining area, and the rear two windows in the second gable are stairwells, and it's considered that to protect the amenity of 36A we're recommending conditions to obscure glaze those windows, and on top of that there will be planting along that boundary to help again mitigate any overlooking. Next slide, please. So this is the elevation, proposed elevation facing Highfield Lodge. As you can see, the front part, that part of that elevation will be the same depth as the existing Highfields Lodge, won't extend beyond the rear of Highfield Lodge as it stands. And the rear part, the two-story part, you can see will be set back with the jagged edges or jagged windows that will look away from the rear garden of the Highfield Lodge. Next slide, please. So this is the rear elevation, looking, so you can see the relationship of to the left will be Highfield Lodge and to the right will be 36 Hoe Lane. So it's the distance between the two properties, and the windows on the left-hand side facing rearwards rather than sideways towards Highfield Lodge. Next slide, please. And this just gives you some illustrations of the proposed care home sitting in view of Hoe Lane. And you can't see it clearly, but Highfield Lodge is on the right-hand side beyond the trees there. Next slide, please. And this one gives you more of the view going south with Hoe Lane in the background and Highfield Lodge in the foreground, and how the proposal is likely to be viewed within the street scene from Hoe Lane. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, so we have speakers now. We have Philip Bond, who is an objector.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, good evening, everyone. I am Philip Bond. I'm the property owner.
Right, you're 3 minutes from now.
Too eager. Apologies.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry. Look, good evening, everyone. I'm Philip Bond. I'm the property owner of Highfields Lodge, which was referred to quite a bit in that conversation. I have two main objections, really. A few points that I think were left out there is Highfields Lodge is a listed building. It's a Grade 2 listed building. And when you refer to the kind of outbuilding at the end, it's a coach house, and that is also listed as well, as along as the wall. And my two real objections here is it's about 1.2 meters taller than the current building in situ. It's already quite a large building, but in size and mass, it is huge. If you look at the proposal, I think some of those pictures there are rather kind. It isn't in keeping with the road, the street, and it certainly isn't in keeping with Highfields Lodge. Secondly, the windows at the moment, the current proposal is windows on the bottom, which are blocked by a listed wall. They're proposing putting 9 windows in, which I know have a jagged edge, and they, politely say that it blocks the view. It doesn't. Anyone that turns their head can simply now look into what was private garden. I'm now going to have 9 windows, light pollution, and a number of people now that are really going to have that ability, which I really feel is quite unfair. I've had a private garden for a number of years. I'm now going to get 9 new windows on an elevated property that is going to give me kind of light pollution and individuals the access to kind of view my property. So my 2 real main objections are: 1, size and scale. I think it's obscene in terms of the actual kind of building. I don't believe it's in keeping. I don't believe any of the surrounding neighbours, and I think you can see that from the objections, I believe it's in keeping with the property. It isn't in keeping with the listed building, and it does overlook my property as well. I think there are some broader surrounding issues around landscaping. There's very little detail around landscaping. It is opposite a Presdale school. So I think the build itself, which may take, I'm guessing between 1 and 2 years, but it's going to be a huge amount of disruption for a road that is already exceptionally busy. I have commissioned a heritage report myself, which didn't feel it was in keeping. Their exact words were in paragraph 200 of the National Planning Policy Framework. It stipulates that any harm to the significance of a designated heritage asset requires clear and convincing justification. In this case, the proposal's design and scale cause harm to the setting of Highfields Lodge without significant justification or public benefit to outweigh the harm. And someone will be able to correct me here, but I think we're only adding 5 or 6 rooms. So it's not as if we're creating a lot more rooms for the local community. We're really not. So they're my objections.
Thank you. Right, members, have we got any questions for our speaker, Mr. Bond? Nope.
Not
Okay,
one.
well, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we have Tom Edmonds and Ben Garlick, who will be speaking for the application, and they have 3 minutes between them. So however you want to share that time.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you, Chair. My name is Tom Edmonds from Walsingham Planning, and I'm speaking on behalf of the applicant and owner, Barchester Healthcare, who specialise in care home development. Sat with me is Ben Garlick, the project architect. This is an important application which stands to bring benefits to the district. There's a strong identified need for housing in the district, including purpose-built older people's accommodation. The existing building is outdated and does not fully support residents' well-being. Prospective residents seek high-quality ensuite accommodation and a range of on-site facilities. A new high-quality purpose-built care home would meet this need in a landscape setting that is ideal for this care home. It will help to free up traditional housing stock, in turn contributing to the council's housing supply, noting that East Herts are currently unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. It would create jobs during construction and approximately 55 new jobs in a range of roles and seniority during operation, and it would contribute business rates to the district. It is acceptable in land use terms because the care home is already on the site, has already been established. It is sustainable development, maximising the opportunity of this large site within the built-up limits of Ware. There are no objections arising from trip generation or parking at the site. Neighbour amenity will be protected. There are no issues arising from daylight, sunlight, privacy, noise, deliveries or servicing. The scheme has been the subject of an iterative design process through pre-app and adjusted whilst the application was live in response to officer comments. We've worked closely with the council throughout to get to where we are with your officers recommending planning permission be granted. It will be a modern, high-quality new care home that is a clean, contemporary design that relates well to its neighbours and to the street scene. It has a carefully designed footprint and landscape buffers to the northern edge closest to the listed building curtilage. As per the tests of the MPPF and the balancing exercise to be undertaken, any less than substantial harm, however limited, is more than outweighed by the significant benefits presented by the scheme. These are the public benefits of maximising the opportunity of a brownfield site to provide high-quality older persons accommodation to meet an identified need, a significant social benefit as highlighted by the officer's report, a contribution towards the council's 5-year housing land supply, constructing a high-quality replacement building and providing aesthetic improvements to the site and the immediate area, a modern building with improved sustainability credentials and environmental benefit, and economic benefits during construction and during operation, including staff employment. For these reasons, I ask the committee to support the proposals and offer a recommendation for approval.
And just to finish, I'd just like to establish that this was a design-led scheme where we worked with the local authority to deliver this proposal, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Members, do you have any questions? No. Okay, thank you very much. All right, Councillor Williams, we're going to just reset the clock and you get 5 minutes.
Feel very privileged. Yeah, so thank you for allowing me to talk. I've not come down on a particular position on this, but I just want to air my concerns in particular as one of the ward councillors and the only one who can actually have an opinion on such a thing. So I understand first, like fully, the need for social care. I think it's obviously very important. When people grow old, you need to have somewhere, you know, to feel safe and secure and somewhere to put your relatives. Yes, I've just got it quite far away. There you go. It's my fault because I move a lot. It's fine. So yeah, I understand the need for social care. I think provision has to be expanded because we do have an aging population and a shortage of it in this country. My contention with this, although my contention with this is simply that there already is a care home there. And if this development here would spring up overnight as if by magic, causing no disruption, I would bite your hand off to get it for the town. But that's not the case, you know. Having this necessitates demolition. That is a messy, loud, noisy process in an area like Hoe Lane. And if I can just actually refer to my notes a bit, Hoe Lane has several big issues. One is that not far from this development is two schools. One almost opposite is Presdale School, a secondary school. And in the mornings, you have lots of families busy dropping off their kids not looking at the road, paying attention. You also have flooding issues. Well, I say flooding, I say basically what I mean is that Hoe Lane in heavy rain basically becomes one giant gully, carrying down all the dirt, detritus and whatever else, blocking up drains and so on. And the other problem it has is that construction of the site, like I said earlier, necessitates HGV usage. Now, Hoe Lane in some parts has a weight restriction of 7.5 tonnes, but there is no enforcement on that weight restriction, and then it is ignored. So I'm going to get kind of to the crux of my problem here, and that's, I worry that should this development go ahead, we would be putting people in harm's way. I need to know that the mitigations put in place will actually, one, mitigate the issues presented, but two, actually be enforceable and be real, because it's all well and good on paper saying, we're going to have these weight restrictions, you're only going to use one route. Well, you know, you may just take another one if it's more convenient and you know there's no punishment for doing so. So those are my main points of contention. Like I say, it's school kids walking around, essentially not far from a busy construction site. And one of the first things that I participated in as a councillor was an ONS on pedestrian safety. And it would be sort of remiss of me to not come here and air my concerns around pedestrian safety. That's more or less where I sit. Like I say, it's kind of a question. I know that we, as a council as a whole, have to provide these places, and given our obligations set out by the government, by the National Planning Policy Framework, we have to look at these things and say, well, this overall may provide a benefit, but I would feel wrong if I didn't come and say those things. I'm not just a member of the council as an organisation, I'm the member representing that area. And to me, the question is one of, does having an improved, slightly larger space for a care home necessitate the potential disruption and risk to pedestrians caused by its construction? Thank you.
Thank you, George. Members, do we have any questions? Yes, any questions to Councillor George Williams here? No? Well, thank you very much, George. Right. So, members, does anybody want to kick me off the kick off the debate? Councillor Devonshire, is your hand up?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. My question has not been referred to at all so far. Presumably there are residents in the care home now. What happens to them during the construction phase? It's going to be, I don't know, a year, 18 months. What happens to those present care home residents?
I maybe wish you'd asked that question. Right. Yep. No, I'm sorry. You can't answer. Well, we've had an answer. We shouldn't have an answer. Do any planning officers want to come in as well?
I was just going to confirm that the care home is sitting empty now when I went on the last visit a week or so ago.
Thank you. Right. Well, the report set out a number. So, Councillor Estop, and then.
There's a conservation issue here. There's the relationship to the listed building.
Yeah.
I've been looking back through the report. I'm not completely sure what that building. Could you tell us a little bit more about Highfield Lodge in terms of its age and materials? Sort of mainly, what are the materials of the listed building?
So, sorry, if you can go back to the pictures. Down again. Up one, sorry. So just give you an idea of materials. As you can see in the foreground on the left-hand side, that's the rear part of Highfield Lodge. It looks like it's a creamy buff brick with tile roof at the moment, which is very similar to the existing care home now. So that's the sort of material we're looking at now.
So Highfield Lodge has a slate roof, does it, or a tiled roof? Slate, is it? Okay.
Sorry, was that a discussion amongst yourselves there? It does share it with the rest of us, please.
On my visit, it's a slate roof, and the bricks look like a gaunt brick, which would have been made locally.
Thank you. Right. So we have this. Does anybody? I think it was raised by the speakers the reason why this was happening. Does anybody want to? Is everybody clear? Right. Councillor Hill and then Councillor Cobb. Sorry, we can't hear you. Oh, I'm sorry. You come in now, Councillor Stowe. I didn't see you.
I always get noticed. One thing that came up on conditions 7 and 16, I want to know whether that includes using some of the demolition materials on the site where possible.
Sorry, are you talking about the swamp condition?
No, I'm talking about condition 7 and 16. Would that cover some of the materials, demolition materials being used back on site, which is normally the requirement to save taking top off the site?
So condition 7 will be more related to reusing materials, because that will have to be agreed with County Council waste team who have recommended this condition, and that's the reason why they've recommended this condition. Condition 16 is more to do with disposing of the materials properly rather than just getting rid of them in any ad hoc manner. So I think answer to your question is condition 7 will cover the point you've raised.
Right. So we had Councillor Hill and then Councillor Copley.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the fact that we're
Can
replacing
you
it.
just speak a bit closer to your
Sure,
microphone?
sure. Going back to the fact that we're replacing a care home with a care home, what are the advantages of the new care home over the old one? Is it ergonomic? You know, the corridors wider? Is it more suited to people with mobility issues?
Thank you. Thank you through you, Chair. It's more the fact that when I originally went to the care home, it was old and tired, you know, if you can describe it that way. So in terms of demolishing the existing care home and modernising it, is to basically provide a more modern facility that fits the bill for today's society rather than when it was first originally built. You know, originally that was a single dwelling house. It then had a change of use and then extensions to make it into a care home. So over time, it's lost its fit for purpose per se.
Would I be right in assuming it would have to be built to higher standards of accessibility, building codes?
Yes, because in terms of building regs, and that's not a planning matter before us, but yes, it would have to be built to much higher standards and current standards than what the building
But
is
it would be
current.
it would be a material consideration
Yes.
that it's building a
Yes.
for its
yeah.
reason for demolition
Yeah.
and rebuild. Councillor Estop.
Is it use class C2? Is that what it is? Is that now and in the future? Is that what it would be?
Yes. Yes.
Councillor Copley.
Yes, just building on kind of the benefits of it. We've talked about obviously needing to get a 5-year land supply. I'm just trying to understand how obviously they're building something which I think only has 5 or 6 extra rooms, how that helps with the 5-year land supply, given there's something there already. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's a twofold matter. They are increasing the number of bedrooms, but we have to take into consideration that they're providing a much more modern facility than what they have now. Currently, in their design access statement and their planning statement, they made it very clear, even though it's a 47-bed care home, they can only use 33. And this facility will allow them to utilize the whole building per se. And so in terms of increasing the number of bedrooms, it may seem like only 6, but there are other strings that are at play here in terms of providing a much more modern facility, something that will be utilized fully rather than partially. That is the current stage at the moment.
Councillor Stowe.
It's not a question really, but I wanted to share some information that might help people understand the new home. I'm a trustee at a neurological unit hospital, and we had to build a new unit there because the corridors weren't wide enough. Because these days, a lot of people are getting quite large, and they have special wheelchairs now, which are about half as wide as a normal wheelchair, and they have to get them down the corridors. And they can't do that in these old buildings because they were narrow corridors, made for the people at the time. And in one of the buildings we have, we had to put new doors in the back and build what I can describe as a cattle shed in the case of a fire, to take the people out the rear door and put them in there while the firemen put the fire out. So it is quite crucial to have these situations correct.
Councillor Copley.
I'm just going to say, I know we've obviously heard concerns about the neighbour who obviously has a listed building here. Can we just go through any conditions that relate to making sure there's not as much disturbance to the neighbours? Is there anything else we can think about doing, maybe moving on to like landscaping and things like that as well? Thank you.
Perhaps if the officers could go through what conditions we've got just specifically on that, and would that help? And then we take
That
it
would
from
probably
there.
be a good starting point and
Yeah.
we can consider.
Thank you, Chair. So there are conditions for landscaping. There's conditions for materials. The applicants have provided a drawing that shows the materials. conservation officers have seen all this information and are content with the proposal and have recommended that the conditions reflect the information submitted. And therefore, in terms of the overall landscaping, harm to the listed building, that's all been assessed with the plan submitted and with the conditions proposed in terms of landscaping and materials.
And I understand there's obscure glazing in some types, and I think one of the speakers, well, the Highfield Lodge is concerned at these angled windows, and I suppose that the depth of those windows is quite crucial for understanding how much overlooking there could be. Has that been considered at all?
That's it. Number 9. Number 9. Thank you, Chair. So as you can see from the drawing here, if you look at the boundary between the north is Highfield Lodge and there's a green area there.
Yeah.
As a circular part. At the moment, there's currently trees already planted within Highfield Lodge. And if you look at the elevation, you can see the windows facing towards the rear of the site. Yes. Yes. Yeah. So those windows are facing away from overlooking towards the straight angle towards the private amenity area, as I term it, for Highfield Lodge.
I think the speaker was making the point that if
Yeah.
You could stand at an angle and have a partial view towards the garden.
You could, but there is planting along that boundary already, and the angle will obviously be obscured by the planting that's there and the distance of over 13 meters to that boundary. So taking all those points into account, it was considered by officers that the mitigation would not be as harmful.
Councillor Carter.
Thank you. Yes, I can see this is just about Swift Bricks, which is condition 36. Says that prior to first occupation of any unit hereby approved, bird and bat boxes shall be provided along with other works. The various wildlife organisations have suggested that the condition should be strengthened there so that it's before above ground development. Swift bricks should be installed. So the approving of the burden of not just bird and bat boxes, but actually integral bricks is more important than bird boxes that you can sort of stick on the side. So can we sort of amend that condition so that it reads something more like prior to above ground development, Swift bricks should be installed, or details of Swift bricks should be installed.
So details provided prior to above ground works.
I think that's right. Yeah. So that they can be approved. Yeah.
Yeah. And what about bats? Is that bat boxes? Is that something that can be as it's?
Bat boxes. Well, I think you should just say them. If the details are going to be provided, they should both be provided before. They should be provided together before above ground development.
Would that be proportionate?
I think what we can do is, because we're working on a standard set of conditions that require the integral Swift bricks to be submitted prior to that earlier stage, and so I think it's reasonable to request them prior to commencement of above ground development. But in terms of them being implemented, we're looking at a set of words that might require them to be constructed prior to the construction of the roof level or something of that effect. And so it's earlier than occupation. It means they get built in with the elevations, where they can be. So that it would sit between requiring the details prior to commencement of above ground, implementation prior to construction of the relevant part of the roof, and we can certainly design a condition that deals with that, which I think is what you're asking for.
Councillor Devonshire.
Thank you, Chair. What is the parking provision on this site for instance, visitors?
Yep.
Thank you.
So overall, the parking is 14 car parking spaces. You can go to the layout plan number 9. As you can see, currently car parking takes place in the same areas and there's no increase in car parking. They're just utilising the front area and organising it slightly better by pushing the building line back a bit and creating car parking spaces along the front and to the rear of the site.
Would that that layout would that give better access to what would we call it, buses, or
Oh, you mean servicing? Yes.
No, I was thinking it's an old people's home, and
yes,
and will some people have mobility impaired and need?
Yes. So the idea is the front part, because the building's pushed back, it will give better access to disabled spaces and bigger vehicles to come into the site.
Yeah. I think Councillor Estop and then Sarah.
This building is in a, I mean, it's a lovely street, and there's quite a variety of buildings. It's not just the one next door. It's the Highfield Lodges. There are a variety of buildings. The existing building is not that special. It's quite functional. So in some ways, I think we can see the architecture in the new building. The effect on Highfield Lodge, while it is bigger, it does not seem to be disproportionately bigger. And in terms of it, the perception from the ground, I'm inclined to follow officers' advice on that and to think that is a satisfactory relationship. Although I hear the objectors' point of view, I think the challenging thing about the new building is that there are the architecture shows an element that goes up 3 stories in one go. So rather than having a dormer window in the roof, it goes up all in one go. But even looking at that, that's one element of the front elevation. It seems to me to work quite well. So I tend to go along with the view.
Councillor Copley.
Thank you. I know there was some concerns raised earlier, particularly by Councillor Williams, about safety issues, and I just wondered if we could turn to those and officers could say any things that have been put in place to deal with those, and whether we can think about whether there might be anything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The Highways Authority were consulted on the application. As you note from the officer's report, they have not come back with any objection, subject to conditions. And one of the conditions was a construction management plan, and that is prior to any demolition taking place, as well as construction. So as part and parcel of the package of the construction management plan, the highways will be consulted on the discharge of that condition, and they will ensure that all the highway safety precautions are in place.
Yeah, following that question, just to sort of reiterate, the condition's been worded consistently with how these typical conditions are worded in major planning applications and with regards to their enforceability. And so they are quite precise in terms of the measures that have to be brought into that condition. So it does go into a lot of detail in terms of the condition itself requires a phasing of construction, a construction program, methods for accessing the site, including wider construction routing, so the issues of weight restrictions can be picked up through the construction management plan. It may include or will include numbers of daily construction vehicles, including the details of their sizes and when they're required for each phase of development, hours of operation, details of turning within the site, and a whole load of other requirements that need to go into that construction plan. So there are ways, precise ways in which that can be controlled. Obviously, the emphasis, the onus would be on the local authority in enforcing those provisions. But in terms of what the planning system is required to do in terms of securing a condition to mitigate those impacts on safety and on noise disruption whilst construction taking place, that's the case. There is also another condition, which is again a standard condition that we tend to see, and that talks about the hours of construction. So preparation, demolition, construction activities being restricted to certain hours off the day and not on Sundays or bank holidays, limited on Saturdays only. So there is also a condition about best practical means in terms of controlling dust emissions, site preparation, demolition, construction activities, and so the spread of dust. There is other best practice guidance that has to follow, and there is also another regulation regime with environmental health that would kick in if those measures were not sufficient to control those sort of issues taking place. And so there are a raft of conditions, precise, enforceable, and standard that you would expect to see on these types of planning application.
Thank you. Just to say, I presume also the developers would be under a duty to make sure the site was secure and nobody could obviously access it without permission. So.
I mean, on-site security would be covered in the construction management scheme, and it would be in everyone's interest for security to be measured and monitored throughout.
Councillor Devonshire.
Yeah, going on from that point, there is one unique aspect to this site, and that is there is access to a school almost opposite. So could that be added into that construction plan that Presdale School twice a day coming in the morning, leaving in the afternoon? During those particular times, there's going to be lots of pupils around, walking, cycling, and using cars, I presume, which is a unique aspect of this particular development.
Yeah, I think there's actually 3 schools up that way. There's a Councillor Hill, but after Councillor Stowe.
I was just going to enlarge on what Councillor Devonshire was saying. And in my experience with sites near schools, to restrict and have a condition to restrict delivery times of deliveries of goods, because that's quite important, because lorries will turn up with a pile of bricks on at 7 in the morning. And they should be restricted. No, not between the times that schools will be coming and going. And it's quite a normal condition.
Right, I'm going to bring Rachel Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, under condition 3 that the planning officers have referred to on the construction traffic management plan, there is a requirement, a parameter of that plan that will have to be approved about the hours of operation and construction vehicle movements. And I mean, I can't speak for the Highway Authority, but I'm sure when they are considering that in consultation and with you as the LPA, that the relationship to the school buildings and proximity and the hours of the school turning up and obviously departures in the afternoon will be fully taken into account.
And yeah,
I mean, there is a difference between construction vehicles and delivery vehicles. And I mean, I've been involved with big projects before I came here, and we used to get these conditions, particularly in London, where you could not deliver between certain hours. And it costs money often from the company that delivered, but they can do this. And I think that's quite different to construction materials. It's actually the deliveries, and I want to emphasize that.
I think there's a way that we can include some words within the condition And one of the provisions is management of traffic to reduce congestion. It could be worded to minimise disruption during school times, acknowledging the presence of schools. You know, it would be quite loose, I think, in terms of how it's wording, but and my colleague is right to say that it certainly would be picked up in the consideration of this condition anyway, but I think we can include that wording to give the confidence that the consideration of the schools and the times of day when the schools are.
Neil, what condition is that?
Number 3.
Number 3.
Sorry, number 3.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Hill.
I was just going to reiterate there are 3 schools there, and 2 of them are special education needs schools.
Yeah.
So they're more sensitive to things like disruption and change in their daily life. And I think every pupil at Pinewood is bussed in. So
Yeah.
at one point it's really busy with people leaving that site and going to that site.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important that we do get those conditions right. And
Yeah. Thank you. Now, there's another point that Councillor Williams raised. I don't know if this is material that about I suppose it's SUDS. Is there any consideration there in planning about Whole Lane is a steep hill straight down, and it does turn into a river in heavy rainstorms. And a lot of that's caused by hard surfaces on the.
Thank you, Chair. As you note from the officer's report, the local lead flood authority were consulted on this. The site is in a flood risk zone 1, so low level of flooding, but surface water, as you said, they have recommended couple of conditions regarding the surface water drainage, so that will all be covered within those conditions, and the applicants will have to provide further details of the SUD management systems for the site before any proposal goes forward in regards to flooding and things like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, there's also a condition, let me just find it. Condition 31, which is about flood emergency plan, essentially evacuation plan. So prior to first use of the development, a flood emergency plan shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority.
Thank you. Right, members, are we at that stage? Does anybody want to make a proposal? Councillor Devonshire.
I'm happy to propose this recommendation, providing that some extra wording for the schools is being considered in condition 3, please.
Yeah, we have the amendments to condition 3 as the officer set out. And then we also had amendment to condition 36 as regards the above ground Swift bricks, details of Swift bricks and bat boxes prior to construction, and then the installation. Was it prior to roof?
Implementation to roof level.
Do better than that. We've got integrated bird and bat boxes will be installed before any part of the roof of the building is constructed, which includes fitting of cappings, coppings, roof tiles, roof trusses, rafters, according to construction method, so we can be specific as to when we want those details. Yeah.
And Councillor Hill.
for clarification on the bat thing, will there be restrictions in
Speak
light?
up, I don't.
Sorry. In clarification of the bats, would there be restrictions in lighting as well? Because obviously, lighting, especially at night, is detrimental to bats.
Thank you for you, Chair. There is a condition for external lightings, and that will all be taken into account once the details do come in, if there is going to be any external lighting.
Right, Councillor Devonshire, you're happy with all that?
Yes, I am.
And Councillor Stowe? That's seconded. Can I have a vote for that? And against? And abstentions? All right, that's granted. Thank you. Now we have the remaining business, but is there any? No, but then there's no other business. I will call this meeting to an end at 14 minutes past 9.